without the hard parts, you can't experience what true joy is. You have to have that tension, that dichotomy between the two, because if we just walked around in this perfect Pollyanna world, we wouldn't have the stories we do. And I know you and I share the same feeling that if you haven't been through something hard, I don't really want to know. I don't want to learn from your story because you haven't experienced hardship. Hardship is what makes the story beautiful.
You're listening to the Big Ideas Podcast with Ashlee Ilg. Tune in for honest conversations as we pursue bold dreams, redefine what is possible, and empower the next generation to live big. You'll hear stories that prove over and over again that just because something wasn't a part of our plan doesn't mean it won't be used for our good. Whether you're already an entrepreneur, you dream of becoming one, or you're raising the next generation of entrepreneurs, this podcast is for you. There's no time to waste on your big ideas. So let's get started. Here's your host, Ashlee Ilg.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Big Ideas Podcast. I'm so excited to share another really fun friend and special guest with you today. I have Chelsea Kuhn here with me today. Chelsea is a wife and mom. She's an artist and an entrepreneur. She's also the co-founder of Making Lemoncake, which is where she speaks and she advocates for medically complex children and the parents raising them and all the just amazing passion and heart that goes into that project. So first and foremost, welcome to the show, Chelsea.
Thank you so much for having me, Ashlee. It's a pleasure.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. So Chelsea and I was trying to think about this, how long we've known each other and been friends. It's definitely been over a decade. So years. And we, our daughters were born within a week or two apart, and she's your oldest. And we just have kind of followed each other along, cheered each other on through different entrepreneurial pursuits, using creative gifts. Just we don't live in the same state, so we can't get coffee in person. But like we were talking about before we hit play, you know, podcasts are just a really good excuse to get together, chat, grab coffee, share the things that God's doing in our life. And we're just excited for you guys to join us with this conversation today. But Chelsea, I would say I've definitely, one of the things I love and I've been so inspired by you over the years and just watching the way you live your life, you raise your family, you love your husband, you pursue all that God has for you. But it hasn't been easy, you know, and a lot of things that we talk about on this podcast are ways that, you know, God maybe took what we thought would be our perfect plan and flipped it completely over, and still finding the beauty in the ways that he's turning those moments that were hard. It still are hard, but I've loved specifically how you've navigated your daughter's health journey and used your gifts, honored her gifts. And like I said, I've just been inspired over the years watching you do all of this. You've done it with such grace, such vulnerability, such honesty. So yeah, we're gonna, you know, I'm so just honored that you're gonna share some of that with us today. So can you, maybe we'll just kind of start there, you know, can you tell us a little bit about your daughter's health journey, what that's looked like maybe in the early years, and we'll of course talk about all the things along the way. So yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you for saying all of that. And I do think it's been maybe even over 15 years since we have met. It's been a long time. I remember your journey with Hannah and all of that. And it was just so beautiful to watch you guys pursue that dream too. It's funny. God really does humble you when you think you have your perfect life mapped out and it gets flipped upside down. The things that come out on the other side are so much more beautiful than we ever could have imagined, but they are so hard to go through. And I think there were many points in our story that we're going to talk about today that it would have been really easy to give up or go a different route, but it wasn't the right thing. And when you are doing what you can to follow the will of the Lord, you always have that little prick in your spirit saying, no, go this way, go this way. I know it looks harder, but I've got you through it. And so I wanted to preface by saying some of the things that we've been through, our story, it does revolve more around the health aspects of the things my daughter has gone through, but everybody goes through things.
Right.
And it is all about our perspective on it. And you've done such a beautiful job covering these stories already on your podcast, and I'm honored to be a part of that. I heard very early on in our health journey that I wouldn't ask for this and I wouldn't wish it upon anyone else, but here we are. So let's ask God to use it for
Mm.
his will and for his glory. And there's nothing else you can do sometimes. So we put this all in his hands at the very beginning. And as hard as that was, it was easier to do it that way because then I can step back and be like, I'm doing my best. What do you have next for me?
Yeah. Which, I mean, that's such
So,
wisdom. I mean, you know, as the person who, I mean, I talk about this all the time, just being that person. It's like, if I just hold it tighter and I just try to manage it better, I try to optimize the way I'm doing everything, then maybe it'll turn out better. And I just love that you're opening with the idea of just surrendering it all and that you knew that from the beginning. And that's probably what's, you know, strengthened and made your journey so just so powerful, so inspirational, because that I don't know that that's the norm. Or maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just me. That's like, I like to just try harder and figure out how I can do it better versus like, God, I'll let you know when I'm ready for you, but let me try everything else first, you know? So,
yeah.
I mean, I'm learning, but I do still like to throw myself under the rug as like that. If I'm being honest, that is still my default. So I love that. And like I said, I've always been inspired by your journey. So,
Well, yes, you put that so beautifully. I'm a very checklist organized type of person. And so when my plan isn't going the way that I thought it was going to, it is frustrating. But I think that you have to figure out how to take your strengths and still try your hardest, and God will meet you
right.
there and allowing Him to speak into you. It is very, very challenging to do that. But sometimes it's in our, actually, I think most of the time, it's in our most humbling places in life where that is what happens. And you get to you get to truly see his goodness and his grace and what he is actually capable of
Yeah.
in our lives. So our story is that we had our daughter, who is almost 10. Hard to believe our girls are going to be
I
10.
know.
Yeah, this June. But we had Kinnan in 2016, and it was a beautiful, perfect home birth. All of my dreams. That was the part that went amazing. It was fast. It was honestly very easy, and she was my first. So I remember giving birth to her and thinking, I'd do this again. Like, as I am pushing, this isn't that bad. Well, that was
Wow.
the easy part. And about 2 months after her birth, we started noticing something was wrong. So to kind of condense her story a little bit, the first year was a journey. We went through a lot of different things where she presented as a very colicky baby, but I knew in my heart that's not what it was, even though I had nothing else to compare it to. And people around me were saying, oh, she's colicky, and don't worry, like, you'll work through this. It's just a season. But I knew in my gut that was not what it
Mm.
was, but we couldn't figure out what was going on. Well, then she started having seizures. She had a lot of different reactions to things. And we started pursuing medical care for her that from 2 months to 11 months was undiagnosed, just in and out of our local children's hospital until we hit a wall at 11 months. She caught a virus, couldn't get rid of it. We ended up in the ER in the middle of the night. And that began our 24-day stay at
Mm.
our local children's hospital, where she was then diagnosed with a rare genetic disorder. It's called glycogen storage disease type 1A or GSD 1A. And I remember when I was first looking all of this up, I'm like typing in GSD and all these German Shepherds were coming up. Because apparently that's the same acronym for German Shepherds.
Wow.
Yeah. I was like, no, no, no. We
This
have a
isn't it.
genetic disorder. Yeah. So we were kind of thrown into a lot of unknown at that point. It's a very rare diagnosis. Unfortunately, we are seeing it more often now, but I also believe I'm seeing it more now because we've put ourselves out there with her story and we're now able to connect to other families that feel very alone in that space.
Mm.
So there are about 9 different types of this, and it affects her liver. Her liver has or lacks an enzyme that creates or converts Her liver lacks the enzyme that converts glucose into glycogen, and you need glycogen to get energy to your cells.
Mm.
So Kinnan is on a feeding tube. She does eat by mouth, but at 4, she was also diagnosed with autism, and that we've been able to work through beautifully. She has really come a long way there, but the sensory side of that and the foods that she prefers to eat do complicate that alongside a genetic disorder. So
Mm.
we have had quite the journey with her, but she is here almost 10 years old and honestly doing very, very well. We've overcome a lot just in the past year, and it's a story I never would have imagined, but I'm honestly really enjoying watching it unfold.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And it is so cool to see the milestones and the victories. And I mean, she's adorable. She's just absolutely precious. And all of her interests and hobbies and artistic things that she does with you are so fun. Um, so I know you're a woman of very, very strong faith. Also one of the reasons we connected so quickly back then and have over the years. But what would you say? What are some of the truths that maybe you clung to? I know you said you handed it all over to the Lord, showed up as best you could, and just trusted Him as you were taking steps forward. Were there some specific truths that you held on to then, and maybe still do today? I know other people listening who maybe have medically complex children themselves, or just navigating just hard seasons with their children. Are there any like specific truths that, just helped carry you in those early days, early months? I know she spent her first birthday in the hospital. So, um, again, when you have this ideal of this is going to be the smash cake with, for me, I know what that feels like. So, hey, friend, I wanted to take a quick pause to ask if you've taken the quiz yet to find out what type of dreamer are you. It's super important to discover what's working for you, but also some things that may be keeping you from really pursuing your greatest purpose. It takes just 2 minutes to find out if you're the skimboarder, the sunbather, the sandcastle builder, or the surfer babe. So jump over to dreamerquiz.com and be sure to share your results and tag me in it. Now back to the show. Yeah, what were some of the truths that just carried you through those moments?
That is such a powerful question. And I love that you're asking that because if someone is going through these seasons, it's really important that you do have truth to hold on to because if you don't have a solid foundation, you will continue to fall over and over and over again. One of the first things that we did was that we realized there was a drugstore across the street from the hospital, and it was the middle of the night, but they were 24-hour. And I told my husband, please go across the street, print off photos of her at her healthiest. We need to visually look at her healthy because what we were seeing in the PICU was very, very scary and very sick. To give you perspective, Kinnan's liver was very extended or distended. So she is only about 13 pounds. She'd stopped growing when she was 6 months. And she had lost all of her color. Her hair had been falling out. And we only had a couple pictures of her healthy because it had already been such a long journey. But we had few of her smiling that were more recent. And so he went and printed those off. He printed off 4 or 5 of them. We put them on every post of her bed.
Mm.
And we opened our Bible on the table next to her. And I won't tell you what scriptures we put around her because I think that one of the things I have learned is that it's easy to just, get on ChatGPT or Google and find healing scriptures or scriptures of encouragement. But when you read the word for yourself, God speaks to you in a different way. So we pulled a lot from the book of Psalms and we read to her Psalm 91, Psalm 23 over and over and over again. We had fallbacks, which I think is very important when you're sleep deprived, when you are tired and angry and you are hurting. You have to have something that you can fall back on that's easy, that's just a part of you that you don't have to think about so that you don't make bad decisions. And so for us, it was leaving the Bible open to Psalm 91. And we just read it over and over and over. And at one point, I didn't know how to pray anymore. So we also decided, well, Jesus actually says, if you don't know what to pray, pray this. And that is where the Lord's Prayer, what we call the Lord's Prayer today, came from. So we had a wall with prayer where we just didn't know what words to use. So we would read Psalm 91 and we would say the Lord's Prayer over her over and over and over again. And what's very cool about that is that later on, after the autism diagnosis, and we had a lot of communication issues with Kinnan, she wasn't speaking much at all until she was closer to 4. One of the first things she started speaking was the Lord's Prayer. And
Oh,
she knows the entire thing. And we still do it every single night. And I know some people are like, don't get in the habit of just saying that and not actually talking to God. No, this is a part of who she is. And she can't sleep at night without doing that with us. So I would say one of the things that we did that was so important was just getting those scriptures and those photos. When the nurses walked into the room or the doctors walked into the room, they saw those before they looked down into the bed and saw this little girl, 13 pounds, no color in her face. Most of the time, her eyes weren't open, barely conscious, hooked up to everything under the sun. She was on like 8 antibiotics at the beginning. And they would look at the picture, and before looking at her face, they would say, she's so beautiful. And we would say, this is the girl we're getting back. I believe we can get her back. I did not know until a year or two later when the head of surgery at Children's approached us at a restaurant and said, I recognize you guys, and she shouldn't be here today. We did not know. I think God protected our minds because I think if we had not prepared our hearts that way and not prepared our minds that way, we would have been very scared. We would have been very fearful and overwhelmed with what was visually before us. But we had such peace. And I can say in retrospect now, because I don't want to give false hope to anyone, that, oh, if you pray these prayers and you put
right.
pictures of your kid up, you'll be healed. That is not the case whatsoever. But it kept our eyes on God no matter what the circumstance. And that took all the fear away, no matter what the outcome was going to be. So those would be my big takeaways is read the word for yourself and pull the scriptures that you know he is sharing with you. If you just go Google them or look them up somewhere else, they're not really a part of your heart
Yeah.
unless you're, studying them and repeating them over and over. But when you are really in the word, it changes you.
Yeah. And I love how you brought up how, I mean, like the doctors coming to you, the nurses coming to you after the fact, where you didn't know that in those moments. How many times we have to just walk in faith. I mean, that is what faith is, right? Not knowing, but just trusting. And I love that. I mean, just very clear reminder that, I mean, we may not know, what the outcome of this version is, or even what faith you built in those nurses when they walked in and they were like, this couple knows what they're believing for, you know. When I was in the hospital right after having Liam, and it was a really traumatic birth, I was in the ICU for days afterwards because it didn't go right. Long story short, this is not the time for the or place, but it just reminds me of this. Andy did something very similar where he put scriptures and truths that we were believing for my health all over my hospital room, so that when the nurses came in, they knew what we were believing for. And after I went home, we saw them again, and they would be like, oh my gosh, I remember just walking in, and my faith was built by watching y'all walk through that with such strong convictions and strong faith of what was happening and what you were believing for. It's not nearly as powerful as yours, but it was in that moment, it was just like, what can I do in this moment? What can I do that honors what I know is true? And without really, I mean, it's not like we were trying to build the faith of the nurses. I mean, that was not our goal. And same with y'all, but you were, yeah, I just love it. I'm going to ramble. So
You can ramble. Go ahead.
no, I love how, I just love how you didn't know how it was going to turn out. And still today, I mean, who knows how, none of us know how anything's going to turn out. I'm not trying to just put a blanket across everything, but when we get those chances to see how God used that for a bigger purpose, for whether it's building the nurse's faith, or whether it's giving you that, like, wow, I'm glad I didn't know the whole story, or I didn't know all the tangents we could have gone down, because it let me stand strong in those moments, because that was all I could hold. And I mean, I could think of countless times too where I'm like, I don't even know what to pray, Lord, and I'm just going to stand on this scripture, this word, and he's always there. Like, he's just always present. And Yeah, I just love that. I also know how you've talked about giving yourself permission to feel grief and joy in the same moment, sometimes in the same hour, where, you know, this isn't the story right now of like, and then she turned all the diagnoses around and here we are. Yes, there's so much progress being made, and we can share that too. Um, but I think there's so much, I think it's so important to and I've said this before, I'm never going to be the person, this podcast will definitely never be the place where we're just putting a big red shiny bow on the stories. They just often can't get tied up like that. And God is still good. So I love how you share about, there's so many times where we can hold grief and we can hold joy in the same moment. So maybe you can talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely. That's actually one of my favorite things to talk about because that's life. And without the hard parts, you can't experience what true joy is. You have to have that tension, that dichotomy between the two. Because if we just walked around in this perfect Pollyanna world, we wouldn't have the stories we do. And I know you and I share the same feeling that if you haven't been through something hard, I don't really want to know. I don't want to learn from your story because you haven't experienced hardship. Hardship is what makes the story beautiful. Every good movie out there, every good book, there is hardship. Um, I just read a beautiful story and I just thought, oh, this book, it's going to be just beautiful start to finish. And then it hit me with the hardship out of nowhere and I sobbed my eyes out.
Mm.
And I remember texting my mom and saying, tell me it gets better. Tell me it gets better or I am closing this now. I will not finish this. And she was like, it gets better than you can ever imagine.
Mm.
And it was hands down one of the best books I've ever read. But it was because that hardship, the grief was there to show you how good the joy can be. And our lives are, this was fiction, but that's our life. All of us go through hardships. And you just mentioned, this doesn't compare to your story, but we can't compare each other's
Yeah.
stories. And I have learned, I really have walked through that a lot with working within the disability community because everyone's story is so different. Even within Kinnon's diagnosis, every diagnosis is very different. I think autism is a great example of a diagnosis where no child is the same. And it really is a spectrum from one end to the other.
Yeah.
You think you have something figured out and it does not work for the next child. It is so different. So everyone's story is their own and it's ours to work through with the Lord. That's what I believe. And so, this dichotomy between grief and joy, I can paint you a picture of where this really hit for me because sometimes I think stories and visuals are the most relatable. And then I can also tell you, you can do some scientific research on this, and it is fascinating. When Kinnan was about 5 years old, I believe I had Wes at this point, although a lot of my story is not great with dates and numbers anyway, so maybe that's part of this problem, very artistic and creative, but I don't remember a lot of details or dates or events within our first 5 years of Kinnan's life. It was a lot of trauma, and I do believe that I think God helped me block out an awful lot, and there are like black holes in my
Yeah.
memory so that I could focus on what needed to be focused on.
Right.
I really do believe that that's what happened to me. So I don't know exactly when this was, but she was around 5, and I was just done with life. So depressed all the time. I remember trying to find help, trying to reach out to counselors, and it was just doors were closing. People weren't calling me back. I couldn't find help. I didn't know what to do. My husband's working very hard trying to support us so that I can be home taking care of her full time. And I just hit a wall where I was like, it's been years and I can't save myself anymore. So what do I do? And I got to the point where I was like, everything in me felt numb. I could not feel love. I could not feel joy. I couldn't even feel anger. I couldn't feel anything.
Mm.
I had no emotion. And this went on for about a year or two. I remember thinking to myself, what happens if I just leave? Like literally leave this world. And I don't say that lightly because I also understand some people have very serious suicidal thoughts. I would not put myself in that category, but I just started to wonder, what if? Would it be easier? Where, like, would I still go to heaven? I I don't know the answers to these things, but I started to have a lot of questions. And as soon as those thoughts came into my head, Ashley, I remember exactly where I was in our house. And I sat down on the floor and I put my was on my knees and I put my face down on the floor, forehead to the wood floor. And I just said, God, I need you to do this. And that's it. And I actually fell asleep on the floor. It was the shortest prayer of my life. And it was the most impactful. I remember, I don't know how long I was on the floor, but everyone else had been asleep. And at this point, Kenan had been diagnosed, and she, being with her glucose disorder, her energy levels were up and down a lot. She didn't sleep. So some people with autism have a very hard time sleeping. And if she was awake, it meant her glucose levels were also plummeting. So she needed constant 24-hour watch. The first 4 years of her life, I think Blake and I slept maybe 3 hours on rotation. And it was when you are sleep deprived, it is one of the hardest things to work through because it feels like there's no end in sight. And so I don't know how long I slept on that floor, but when I woke up, I just remember feeling joy, feeling so much joy to the point where I just started smiling and crying. I hadn't even been able to cry. I was so numb to everything around me. And I cried. I felt joy. I felt love. I remember running to Kenan's room and she was sleeping and just holding her and kissing her and thinking, I love you. And I couldn't feel anything before. I couldn't even feel love for her. And it sounds so bad, but it's so beautiful because even at your most broken, where you feel nothing, just like that, he could give it back to you. And every now and then I will, like, especially when she's being really naughty, I'll tell Blake, I wonder if I still have these feelings. And I'll look at her and be like, you're being so disappointed. I still love you so much. Like, nope, it's still here. God didn't take that away. It's still here. That
Mm.
love is so deep, even though you are being awful right now. And that's been almost 5 years ago. And there hasn't been a day since then that peace that passes all understanding and the joy of the Spirit has not been radiating from me. Now, I can be a very choleric personality, so maybe it doesn't always look like it's radiating from me, but it's there inside and I feel it. And I love my kids and my husband and this life so much. But it's like that rock bottom. You just want everything to be over. And then within seconds, that feeling is gone.
Yeah.
And so I still experience grief for things, but I don't experience that deep, dark depression. And what I learned through all of that is that one, God can change you in a second, but two, when you have these, when you have hardship happening around you, you can still feel joy. When she is being very disobedient, I can still feel peace and joy. When we are back in the hospital again, I can still feel peace and joy. They are coexisting in the same moment many times.
Mm.
And if you look into the neuroscience behind this, I am not going to repeat it because I'll butcher all of it. Again, creative mind, although I enjoy all of those things and learning that. But if you look into the neuroscience behind this, it is so fascinating to see how there have been studies where they hook electrodes up to your brain and they can watch grief and joy literally firing at the
Mm.
same time during different experiences. They work together. And so we've walked through this experience or different disability experiences and stories with a lot of different moms. And it has been one of the coolest things to hear so many people say, I never thought I could feel so hard in one area and yet feel so appreciative at the same time. So thankful for life, so much joy and blessing in the smallest little things. And God just made our brains wired in such a cool way where
Yeah.
we can do both at the same time.
Yeah, that is so cool. My writing coach, also author and speaker and all the things, Mary Morantz, she talks about like the IQ and the EQ, right? Where it's like full emotion, but also full, I guess, left brain. I'm like you. I'm like, I would rather just think about it in pictures. um, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that story too. I know, um, getting myself back together here. He meets us right where we are. No shame, no inability to help us. I mean, yeah, Thank you for sharing that. That was beautiful. I'm not going to even try to add to it. You mentioned in that too how, even with the same diagnoses, there's differences. And even, parenting multiple kids, we say it all the time, like we have 5 kids and they're being raised in the same household and they're as different as you could be. Um, and I think just motherhood in general is a lot of just dealing with like other people's perspectives, other people's opinions, what their ideals are for our kids and our families. Whether, like I said, whether we have a child with disabilities or medically complex diagnoses or not. I think the pressure to appease or impress others, I think it can exist so heavily. And especially when you do have a child with complexities, especially complexities that aren't necessarily obvious, like they are under the surface, and you're just maybe out in public, and whether it's a complete stranger or even, family or friends that are aware of things, it's still, I feel like there's so much pressure. And I'd love for you to just speak to the parents who are like, how do I walk in peace and confidence knowing that I'm doing what my child needs in this moment and not being concerned with what it looks like to others or what they might expect me to do? What would you say to that?
That is such a good question. So how would I speak to other parents that are going through this and, fighting that comparison or trying to do the best that they can for their kids, not feeling overwhelmed? I mean, the first thing is shut off social media for a little bit. I think it can be a fantastic resource, and I do a lot of work in that space. But if you are feeling overwhelmed and confused, sometimes you need to turn that off and just get
Mm.
quiet before you go back and start researching, because there's so much out there at our fingertips that, again, it can be overwhelming. I would also say, in a lot of my experience, it's been finding your people, this finding your community, your tribe, and finding people that not that they have to think exactly like you or have the exact same diagnosis, but I met a girl, my friend Amber, who's now my business partner. Our kids have very, very different diagnoses. So Kinnan she's diagnosed with autism and a genetic disorder. Her son Kai was diagnosed with epilepsy, Dandy Walker malformation, hydrocephalus. He is visually impaired, pretty much legally blind, and in a wheelchair, and cerebral palsy. You would think we don't have things in common, but we both know what it's like to walk through this with a child, and we're able to just have somebody else because our mindsets are so much alike, we have somebody else that can hold our hand and walk us through things.
Mm.
Or when we need a break, we can say, "Hey, can you be with my kid for a minute so I can walk away?" It's the having at least one person where you can have that unspoken agreement is very important. And being able to find that tribe of people where you can uplift each other. And we've started a community locally. We have it on social media as well, but locally we have a group of moms that gets together once a month for coffee, and nobody shares the same story. But the rules at the table are, if you're here, we're not talking about the drama. We are here to uplift each other and laugh, and actually for once not talk about what's going on with our kid if we can help it. Like, how are
Yeah.
you doing? What's going on with you? And having those parameters and spaces has been really healthy, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wanted to talk about making lemon cake. I think I would love for you to just share even just the name of it. I mean, the name of it has such a cool story and meaning behind it. So I think, in talking about community and talking about finding your people, um, I love how you've built the Making Lemon Cake community and just the platform and the resources and everything that you and Amber have created together. I think it's such an important lesson and idea that you have of you know, um, when like just the importance of taking your eyes off of yourself and using those moments and those seasons to serve others and give back to others. You do it so well, and I think your lemon cake business is, I don't want to call it a business, but ministry, community. There's so many pieces of it. So I'd love for you to just share with us what is Making Lemon Cake and how it came about, and we'll dive deep into that.
Lemon cake, well, we don't bake. We say we don't bake, we advocate. Making
Love it.
lemon cake, actually, it came about accidentally. as most great
Right.
things usually do. And I met Amber in 2020 when we felt like we didn't fit in anywhere. And she and her mom had, unbeknownst to what was going to happen in 2020, had just opened a play space.
Wow.
And it was designed for all kids and all abilities, but it also had great spaces for kids with disabilities, including a sensory room. And I had heard a little bit about Amber's son, and I felt like maybe if we go there, we won't be looked at and judged because we were dealing with a lot of meltdowns and things. So I met Amber there. I met her mom, and I just fell in love with them. I thought, these are great people. These are my people. I want to spend time here. And I feel like this is a judgment-free zone for my daughter where we can learn and grow and figure out public spaces without people assuming that it's bad behavior. You mentioned before, sometimes it's really hard when you can't see the diagnosis. Autism is oftentimes that diagnosis. I say it's easier to deal with the glucose disorder because you can tell Kinnan has a G tube. So people usually can see a little Mickey button kind of popping through her shirt a little bit there. And, or they see that she's on a feeding tube or she's getting a glucose check. So they're like, okay, they have grace when they can see it. They don't, maybe there's questions, but people have so much grace when they can see what's happening because we can understand it a little bit better. And with autism, it looks like just a lot of bad behavior, bad parenting, lack of discipline, meltdowns, and you don't often know the story. So, one,
Right.
if you ever see somebody having a meltdown, don't assume that they're just a bad kid or there's like bad parenting. There might be something else going on.
Yeah.
And so when I found Amber and was welcomed into that community, that was my first aha moment of this is so necessary because this gets me out of my house with people who get it, with people who want to help and support. And it allows my child to be a child. It allows me to just be mom for a little bit. And a few years went by. Amber and I developed a friendship, and I remember reaching out to her. We didn't know each other that well, but I reached out to her and I said, I don't know if you would want to do this with me, but I feel like you and I get a lot of the same questions. Maybe we should just jump on Instagram Live, which we had never done before, didn't even know how to do, actually butchered the whole thing, and just answer the questions that we get a lot and see if we can help somebody.
Yeah.
So we did, and it had great feedback, and we decided to start a YouTube channel. Now, we didn't keep up with that. It's great resources that we put out there, but what it quickly turned into was door after door opening in a different direction. And that different direction quickly became we need to be face to face with moms, not behind a screen. We really need to get them out and get them together, just like our initial meetup was. Because once I saw her face, the kids saw each other, the walls came down and there was community. And I'm not negating the power of a screen. I think that online communities are so powerful as well. And we wrote a book, and there's a whole chapter in there about the power of social media and using it for good. What can come out of that, the community and the tribes that you can find there. But we started Lemon Cake about a year after all of this. And we named it Lemon Cake because we said, well, when life hands you lemons, make lemon cake, because honestly, lemonade is just not going to cut it in this part of our life. So we it's funny, Amber doesn't even like lemon cake. I do. So if anyone wants to make me one, I'm always down for that.
Yes.
But she's like, so funny, I don't even like it. We began speaking at some different conferences. We've been to a lot of different events where we just do some outreach for moms. And over the last 3 years, our favorite part of it is the part that is free. It costs you a cup of coffee. Just come out for 1 hour, maybe two, and get coffee with us. And we have seen this community grow and grow exponentially in the last year because we realized how valuable, I mean, for any mom to have a hot cup of coffee start
Right.
to finish. And honestly, like we're not even buying the coffee for people. Like this is just we're giving you an
Yeah.
environment and connection, and just come have coffee with us. And then we do have an online community. We have a lot of different resources, whether it's we have an ebook out there. We have a lot of resources on YouTube, different podcasts that we've done. So all of those things are there in the platform, but we feel that it is most important for people to have that face-to-face connection. And we were sitting at a recent coffee, and there's maybe 15 women at the table, and two of them were sitting next to each other who knew each other, but had no idea how similar their stories were. And if it hadn't been for someone else at the table saying something that opened their conversation, they would have never known that their stories were as close as they are. And both of them sat there and they're like, I thought I was totally alone. And that's why we do what we do. I just want people to be able to get out of the house and to be able to find someone, even for an hour, another mom that understands what they're going through. We've had moms that were very close to a great children's hospital. So we have moms that literally leave the hospital,
Mm.
come have coffee with us, and then go back to the hospital again. And to know that we were able to just give them an invitation for reprieve for an hour or two, that is such a blessing.
Mm.
And yeah, I never thought that I would do this. In fact, I avoided the whole disability community for a long time because I felt like it's so dark, it's so dramatic, it's so hard, and you can't carry the weight of everyone's burdens. But to what we were speaking about prior, I can help people find joy for a minute, and I can help them do that part. I'm not negating the grief,
Mhm.
but I can give them a light when a lot of the disability community is focusing on how to provide therapy and work through the hard stuff. We can give them coffee. Blake and I were talking, Blake is my husband. We were talking earlier. I think there's a comedian, I want to say it's Seinfeld, but says at the end of the day, if everything's gone wrong, you still had a good cup of coffee. Like the coffee didn't do anything wrong. That coffee was good. And you can reflect on that and look forward to that coffee the next morning. So coffee has become our good. It's
Mm.
become our connector. And then the conversations that flow around that, that's our ministry. And it's been beautiful. And I'm just very excited to see where all of this goes and watch it grow.
Mm. Yeah. I love that. And your sense of humor and your just your fun way of looking at things is it's so light and it's so refreshing and different. And I think that is such a unique piece of what y'all do, maybe in comparison to other options out there for families with disabilities. So what would you say has changed most in you over the years, especially as you've grown this community of serving others and of course with Kinnon's progress too, but personally, like what has grown the most in you, would you say?
The thing that's grown the most in me would be I went from seeing and knowing that these hardships were out there for other people to actually experiencing them for myself, learning how to navigate it, and now being on the other side, helping others find joy in their journey. And it's that whole realization of going from, you know something, like you know it, but do you truly understand it? I would say my level of empathy changed radically living in the hospital for 24 days, spending Kinnon's first birthday in the hospital, and seeing other families that had been there for years. That will change you for the rest of your life.
Mm.
And it really puts the preciousness of life in perspective, the beauty of love and compassion and community. Those things become so much more real when you experience the hard stuff. Now, I don't wish that upon anyone. I'm not telling you, oh, go out and find your hard, like go do something that's miserable or, experience something that is so dramatic or traumatic. I don't wish that upon anyone. I don't wish it upon myself. I certainly wish I could take it away from my child, but there's beauty on the other side of all of it. And now I'm on the side where I believe I can do very hard things. I knew I could do hard things. Now I really know, and I've proven I can do hard things. I can teach my kids how to walk through something hard and not just tell them how to do it. I can help another mom walk through something very difficult because I've actually been there, even if it's not the exact same thing. And I think all of us can look at something in our life that changed that path for us because utopia, Pollyanna, those aren't real. As much as we want them to be, or we try to maybe protect ourselves from any sort of difficult experience, they're going to happen. The Bible tells us we're going to have trials and tribulations, but God is so good.
Mm.
And if we cling to Him, we will walk through on the other side of that. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but there's always hope in the darkness. And that is something that I held on to so, so dear when we were in the hospital, walking through multiple diagnoses, and now looking at other people going through it. I have so much, I don't want to say sympathy, probably empathy is a better word, so much empathy for another mom specifically who is walking through the beginning phases of things like this, which is why Amber and I wrote the book that we did, and we made it short and sweet with lots of pictures, because most moms need a little hope and encouragement, but they don't have the time to sit down and read a good book.
Mm.
I was handed so many resources to an overwhelming extent when we first experienced Kinnon's diagnosis. And Amber and I thought to ourselves, what did we wish we had? Basically a pamphlet, something small that was encouraging, that could help us identify with where they were and tell them it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
So that's the greatest thing that I have learned, is being able to go from knowing to truly understanding.
Yeah, I love that. And I've heard it too, where, the person that you need to, oh, I always butcher it. I gotta like write this down and like rehearse it, but it's like the person that you're called to be is the person that you needed when you were going through,
Oh,
your
yes.
struggle, something like that. I gotta look it up. But as you were speaking, I'm like, she's doing the thing that I'm the quote, being the person that you needed when you were walking through all of that. Yeah, I love it. I knew I was going to love this conversation. I've watched you walk through this kind of from a distance, and it's so beautiful. And if you're watching this episode on YouTube, I can't help but notice the painting in the background. Did Blake paint that one, or was it like a family collaboration? I'm trying to remember. There is a story.
Yes. So before we started Lemon Cake, we started a business called Heartwork, and I know you have some
Yes.
pieces in your house. This painting behind me was a collaboration that Blake and Kinnan did together. And we still have Heartwork. We took a little break for a little while, but Kinnan does abstract painting. She loves to draw. Right now, she's very into writing books
Mm.
and picture books. She just did like a 250-page picture book.
Wow.
Animals. She's obsessed with animals. And so these animals, they go all over the world on a journey. It's
So
very cute.
amazing.
But we started with abstract paintings and cutting them into little hearts and putting them on a white background, framing them. We created thousands of these, sold them all over the country, and they helped support her medical bills. And that's something else too. You go through financial hardships a lot of the times, and that's a whole nother podcast for another day. But I do want to acknowledge that
Yeah.
the stress that comes along with parenting a child with disability, I don't want to negate that or downplay that there's a financial side as well. And we looked at that as an opportunity from day one to get creative. My husband and I are both artists. So we said, God, you gave us this ability. There's got to be a way that we can use this creatively to help take care and lift this burden while also finding joy in that.
Mm.
And so Heartwork was born, and this is just one of the big abstract paintings before it got cut up into little hearts. And recently the kids have brought it back to life. And I will tell you this, because I know you love my kitty girl, and now
Yes.
everyone knows how much she loves animals. Kinnan wanted to, and you're also teaching entrepreneurship so well to your community and your kids. Kinnan came to us and she said, I want to earn some money because I really want to get a Wildcrats activity book. And I'd really like to do a zoo experience. We have Columbus Zoo near us. It's the #1 zoo in the country. And you can buy experience tickets where they let 6 people come in at a time and get 45 minutes behind the scenes with zookeepers and
It's like
whatever animal
her
it is that you are seeing.
dream.
Yes,
Yes.
everything she wants. So we said, well, you can do some work around the house and you can negotiate your price for these projects, or you can start Heartwork back up. And she said, well, I'd rather do Heartwork. So we had it closed for the last year and a half, almost 2 years. She recently opened it back up, and within a couple of days, she made a few $100s with her artwork. She's
Love
9 years
it.
old, and she bought her tickets, and she even bought a ticket for Blake, and they went and had a cheetah experience last
Mm.
week, and it was very special. So then Wesley, who is 4, decided he needs to earn money so he can buy things. So she hired him. So he is now her first employee, and
Love it.
she made him do the next painting for her.
I mean, she's got the creative side, she's got the business ownership, she's got the duplication and the
Yep.
systemizing. Love it. Well, the painting behind you is catching my eye. I'm so glad you brought up Heartwork because I was like, make sure you tell us where we can find it because I saw it back up and going and I was like, yes. I told Hannah that she was doing her Heartwork again too, Kinnan, and she was like, oh my gosh, I love when she does it. So
Oh,
I've got to make sure she
thank
sees
you.
what she's working on. But the painting behind you with it's just black and white. And I mean, a lot of her Heartwork is very, very colorful and vibrant, foiled paints and metallics and everything. But I can't help but notice the black and white behind you and how that is just such a reflection of the grief and the joy and the hard and the peace. And I'm sure it means a lot to you for so many reasons too, but I can't help but notice just the metaphor and the symbolism of um, just the artwork that's been behind you during this whole episode.
Thank you for pointing out Heartwork and the dichotomy of the black and white behind us. This is all accidental, and I don't know if you can
Mm.
see, there's a cross that accidentally happened in this painting as well.
Oh,
So this is really special to us. And yes, Kinnan is painting again, so people can find her on Instagram and see what she's doing.
yes, I love that. Yeah, so on that note, yes, tell us where we can find you, find the Heartwork, find everything with Making Lemoncake, so we can follow you and stay connected.
We're mostly on Instagram. So we are Making Lemoncake on Instagram. You can also look us up online. Our website is in our Instagram handle, but also makinglemoncake.com. And you can find Heartwork by Kinnan, like artwork, but Heartwork by Kinnan, Kinnen, on Instagram. And then my personal is just Chelsea Kuhn.
Love
So
it.
that's where you can find me.
Yes, and I'll link everything in the show notes, of course. But Chelsea, thank you so much for being here today, for just sharing your heart, sharing your story, and just the beautiful perspective that you have of it, and just the honest way that you share it. It gives so much hope, gives so much joy, and just truth behind the hard. Um, and yeah, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Everybody listening has too as well. Thank you for everybody who has joined us today. As always, keep those big ideas coming, and we will see you on the next episode. Hey friends, thanks so much for tuning in today. Before you go, it would mean the world to me and my family if you would share this episode with at least one person who you think might benefit from this message. And of course, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. You can also follow me at Ashlee Ilg on Instagram to keep up with our adventures and for continued encouragement as you pursue your big ideas. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time.